All right. I am not going to be spending a lot of time today going back over the stuff that we have already learned so far this week. We will continue to review that as the week goes on, but I do need just about every minute of today's class to get us through the lesson I need to get through today. You don't need to copy that off the board. I promise you, I will get you all the notes on the anchor chart as soon as possible, all right? I will get you all the notes on the anchor chart on the board. It is important that you pay attention, because if you just talk, if you just write that down, you're not going to understand it nearly as well as if you pay attention with me in class. All right, latitude and longitude are not going away. They play a very important role in the stuff that we're talking about today, and that is going to be air masses. Now, the reason why this is important, the closer, Axel, we get to the equator, the warmer the air is going to be. The further away from the equator that we get, the cooler the air is going to be. And you should already kind of have an understanding of that, because we talked very lengthy in class that where you are located in latitude greatly affects the temperature and climate of your area. So again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I'm not acting like that the equator and your distance from the equator doesn't play an important role in everything. We probably won't, Liam, spend a lot of time today talking about the difference in seasons in the northern and southern hemisphere and how they're opposite. That we saw that in the questions that we did during our review today. But today, we are going to talk about global air masses. Global air masses. And I like to think of this as, if I were to give you 5 Legos, and you were able to put those 5 Legos together in very different ways today, Riley, it's going to mean something different. If you learn what each piece means, clicking together, Maddie, is going to be very, very easy for you. There were some people in the first class that were so far ahead of me. They're like, I know what this is. I know what this is. Now they got a little too far ahead because they were mentioning something that's not even true. There's not even one of those on here. But their reasoning was correct. Had it been one of the things that we were writing down, they would have gotten it 100% correct. So we're going to learn some of these words, and then we're going to learn how to put these words together as we go along. Oh, come on, Nearpod. You cannot be slow today. All right. Our first 2 words that we're going to write down, the first 2 Lego pieces I'm going to give you today, Leo, are continental and maritime. Now, maritime should spark a little bit of something in the back of our heads from when we were back in ecosystems. What does that word maritime look very similar to that we talked about way back in ecosystems? Porter. Not salt marshes, nope. Marine. And what was the marine biome? Water. So guess what maritime is related to? So anytime that we see the word maritime, we are going to put that down as water. Now I am going to use the blue for that because it is water. Now, if you have water, do you have a higher likelihood of evaporation and then therefore moisture in the air, or do you think you have a less likelihood of there being evaporation? So when you have maritime air, it is going to be more humid, right? Because it's over, like a lot of the times it's going to be over the oceans, like you said with marine. But the air itself associated with maritime is going to be humid. All right, I'll pause. All right, so we have maritime. We associate it, and very correctly, that's like the marine. It is. It's having to do with a lot of oceans, because there's a whole bunch of oceans, right, that cover the earth. Continental. When I say the word continental, I see the word continent in there. What do you think continental has to do with? Continental has to do with land. So when I come back in here and I open up a new one, I'm going to write that in brown because when I think of land, I don't know why the brown is like the color I think of. Because of the dirt. Continental has to do with land. Now, just like the maritime, do you have a higher likelihood or a lower likelihood of evaporation if you were over land? Lower, because there's no water associated with that. So that air is going to be dry air. Dry air. If you're talking about continental, you're going to have dry air. Make sense? Maritime, moist air. It even starts with an M, so that might be a way to remember that. Continental, dry air. Maritime is moist air. Continental is from over the land, and it is dry air. Now, I know some of us aren't feeling the best today, right? Some of us are having a hard time in class today. This video is not just for people at home. Although, I mean, I miss Lindley and Colt like bad. Hope you guys are doing all right and watching the video. Like those of us that are feeling bad, maybe you watch this later so that you can catch up on these notes. That's the first two Lego pieces I'm going to give you, Lily, all right? So anytime I give you a Lego piece that says continental, you're like, okay, I know that this is dry air that came from the land. If I give you a Lego piece that says maritime, cool, this is a moist air mass that came from an ocean somewhere, most likely, all right? 3 more Lego pieces, and I'm done giving you Lego pieces after this. We have a polar, a tropic, and an Arctic Lego piece that I'm going to give you. If I gave you a tropic Lego piece, what does that word tropic make you think of? Warm or hot, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do this one in red because we just said it's hot. So I'm going to change my color to red. If you don't have the pens to do this, do not stress it. Spell it right. I think I did, yep. Hello. It is not working. I don't know if it's Nearpod or me trying to do the video and Nearpod at the same time, but it's working slow. So when I say the word tropic, to you it should mean warm and hot. Now, when I change this to a blue and I put the word polar up here, what does polar make you think of? All the way back in ecosystems, Riley. Cold, right? This is going to be cold. So I have tropic, which is warm and hot. I have polar, which means cold. And I have one more on there that I'm going to use a different color blue for. And this new word for today is something you've heard before, Arctic. Now, Arctic is going to mean something, and I do need you to use this exact terminology, bitterly cold. This is not just cold. Is it cold outside today? Yes, I would say today is very polar. Remember a few weeks ago when it was like 15 and 10 degrees when we came to school? That is Arctic. That is bitterly cold. So, again, I know that we're not all there yet. We're going to get there. If I see the word maritime, it means that the air is going to be more humid. If I see the word continental, the air is going to be dry because it formed over land. And then the other descriptor Lego that I'm going to click together with that is either tropic, polar, or Arctic. For example, continental, polar. Continental, polar. Look at your Lego pieces. What does continental mean? Dry air. Polar. So a continental polar is going to be cold, dry air. Continental polar, cold, dry air. And look at where it's coming from. To the north of us. Even further away from the middle line. Further away from the equator, which is why it's going to be colder air. Continental polar is going to be a cold, dry air mass. All right, 14 minutes of class, 5 minutes left on the video. Continental polar, continental and brown because it's from the land. That means it's going to be dry air. Polar means cold. Take the two Legos, click them together, Sadie, and you have cold, dry air. Well, got to go back to this and close this. Here we go. Next, I have continental tropic. Reese, it says tropic. What's the air going to be like? Warm. It's over the continents. Warm, dry air. Look at where it's coming from. It's coming from the south, even closer to the equator. Shocking. That's where it's warmer. So continental tropic is going to be warm, dry air. Sometimes this warm, dry air hangs out in the Midwest for a long time, and they have droughts because there's no humidity in that, and it does not rain very much during that time. Continental tropic is warm, dry air. All right, now you'll notice that my first word has changed. I'm talking about maritime now. What is this air mass going to be like? What would be the descriptor? Maritime. It's going to be over the water. It's going to be humid air, moist air, because there's so much water there can be evaporation. But I'm taking the maritime Lego piece and I'm clipping on the polar piece. Maritime, polar. Over the oceans, moist air, polar, cold. Cold, moist air. If you notice, this is coming from more north. This is why it's so cold and rainy in Seattle so much of the year. Look, Seattle's going to be like right in here. That's why, because they have maritime polar air influencing them. Let me go to this. All right, maritime, polar. We click those Lego pieces together, Dawson. Maritime means moist air. Polar means colder or cool. Cool, moist air. That is only going to happen in the north. You're not going to have maritime polar air in the Gulf of Mexico. It's warm there. All right, moving on. I'll come back to it. I'll leave it up there for you. The next one is maritime tropic. Well, polar was cold. What does tropic air sound like it's going to be? Hot, moist air. That's coming from where? In relation to the equator. Closer to the equator or further away? Closer to the equator, so to the south of us. Yes, it is going to be more moist because it's warmer. You are correct. So jumping back to that first word of continental, what's the air going to be like? Dry. It's over land. It's dry. Arctic. Bitterly cold. We're talking really cold. Again, today outside, kind of polar. That week when we were here and it was like the highs were 15, that's Arctic. Dawson said he met somebody, they said it was like -4 or something back home. That's kind of Arctic. That's cold. Continental Arctic. You're going to have bitterly cold, dry air mass. I will put that on here. All right, so here are the notes for the people that might need to go home today that aren't feeling great in class. Here are the notes for the people that are definitely at home that hopefully are feeling better and will be back to class because we sure are missing them at school. We have continental polar, cold, dry air. Continental tropic, dry, warm air. Maritime polar, moist, cold air. Maritime tropic, moist, hot air. Continental Arctic is going to be dry air that's bitterly cold. And then as a class, we're going to look up, is there such a thing as maritime Arctic? We'll look that up. And then if we don't have time to add that to this video, although you do have time to like, share, subscribe, notification bell, and all the other junk. That'll be awesome for my 43 subscribers.